So what's your next big project?
So I was pretty inspired by a book called, Younger Next Year. And so I've read it numerous times. And so really health is become such a big priority for me in understanding that if you don't have your health, you don't have anything.
Right, exactly.
The other thing, as I figured out, is the only thing you and I and anybody else in this world can't buy is time. What's the next big thing project for me is I've been writing a lot. You inspired me in the past to write and continue to write notes and everything like this. So I've got somewhat of a book title that I'm thinking about, and it's called Winning in the Third Period of Life.
Welcome to Your Next Big Project is You, a podcast based around the theme of time. Time to be able to press pause on life. Time to reevaluate what's important. Time to reminisce about where you've come from, what you've learned, and what you've accomplished. Time to revisit your goals, dreams, and vision. And time to remember the people in your life. That's it, my friends. If you've got time, fasten your seatbelt and listen in as we discuss opportunities for the next 5 to 25 years of your life. And remember, your next big project is you. Well, welcome to our podcast. Your next big project is you. I'm very, very excited to have a friend of mine for the last 2 decades. Scott McLean and I met, I believe, about 20 years ago when Scott was a regional divisional sales leader for one of the global mutual fund organizations, and was leading the charge, and then progressed literally to Toronto to enter the official C-suite to oversee all sales and marketing issues throughout his great country up in Canada. And from there, took a retirement and then took some time off to think, and has started his newest venture that's all focused around his title of his organization, Business Leaders Growth Group. And Scott will converse a little bit and talk about that and all the great work you're doing with entrepreneurs and business owners and bringing people together through a cohort and follow-up coaching and things. But I know you as a devoted father, as a devoted husband, with an extraordinary and amazing group of friends. And for some reason, buddy, you seem to find a way to get people together. You're like this ultimate connector. If it's a Super Bowl, if it's a Stanley Cup playoffs, if it's a cool, unique golf trip, there's like 8 to 12 people converging at your house somewhere in the US or Canada, and you figured this thing out to bring people together. So those are some of the reasons why I truly, love you for who you are, and not just beyond all the business success that I've had a pleasure to see up front and personal for the year. So Scott, welcome to our podcast.
Well, thanks, Leo. It's an absolute thrill to not only be with you today, but I've said this to many of the friends that you just referred to, is that every time I speak to Leo, I'm inspired. I want to go and do more. I want to do something else, and I got to think about something, and maybe I go and read something that you've shared with me, or just tie into another experience. And then, of course, I happen to share that with others. It's like, I'll give an example. The other day, I was telling my friend Don, who I think you know as well. I said, I was speaking to Leo the other day, and on the way up, and we were talking about this book. And he went on and on. You went on and on about the book and some of the experiences that you're reading in that book. I was telling Don about it. He goes, I can. He just said I can hear Leo. He was so excited about sharing that with you. And I said, that's just every time I speak to Leo. That's
wow.
So it's a thrill to be here.
This is an opportunity for our listeners to hear all the things that are driving you today and what you've learned in your career and what you're doing now to help others to continually. You're making a difference, Scott, in people's careers and in people's lives. And that's why I wanted to talk with you today. So here's my first question. I got a few that I put down here today, but you left the corporate world after many years of selling, managing, and leading people to success. I'm curious, thinking back on it now, what were some of the things you learned in driving an organization to achieve, results, unparalleled type of goals that were being achieved, to success that you were being measured on? What were some of the things that you learned over the years?
Well, I think the number one thing that, and it's so easy to say, and it's just the hardest thing to ever do, is that culture is everything in an organization. I mean, if you have culture or you don't have culture, and you'll find somebody that will change the culture. And if you can create a culture where people are buying into what the corporate culture is or the company culture is, you're on the path. You're on the path to greatness. If you read Good to Great as an example, a great book, it's all about culture. It's about who's setting the tone and who's setting the expectation. A good friend of mine from the hockey world, Brian Burke, that we came together. It was kind of an interesting way we came together, but he shared with me years ago his philosophy on managing, and I borrowed it from him, and I implemented it in my business world. And it said, surround yourself with good people and smart people, and make sure they're not afraid to speak up. And I just think it's so powerful that, in today's world, do you have yes people around you, or have you got people that will hold you accountable for what you
Right.
say you're going to do? And it sort of leads me to something that I was a believer in, and it was probably because I was held accountable very early on, as if I reflect back and growing up as a kid, is be accountable, as a kid, to my parents. But I think accountabilities and creating accountabilities for people sets the tone on every aspect of their life. And
Yeah.
that whole accountabilities. And then what I took was from that, is this phrase that I created, and I probably borrowed it. I probably didn't create it, but I probably borrowed it. But I say this all the time. I say it today, and I've said it a million times. Inspect what you expect.
Right.
So tell people what you expect of them, and then tell them how you're going to inspect them. So where do they know? And people, no matter what they're doing in life, they want to know where they stand. And if they're really good people, going back to their smart people, they always want to get better. They always want to get better. And so it's that whole thing, accountability, inspect what you expect, and just let people know where they stand. And what will amaze you, and I know it's happened with you, Leo, as well. People rise to an expectation that they never thought possible, and either did you. And they just exceed that expectation. So it's been wonderful to see that. And I think it's in all aspects of life, not just in a work environment.
Well, there are three things I just captured there: culture, and how significant and important that is, the issue around the people, and surrounding yourself, as you said, from what you learned from Mr. Burke over the years, in the issue of accountability and setting expectations, letting people know what you expect and where they stand and where the gaps are and how to manage. I worked for a gentleman back in the 80s, I can still remember, and he always said to me, he said, Leo, challenge your manager. Don't be afraid. You have to balance the fine line of respect and proper communications.
Right.
But he said, you have to do this. And having good people, you mentioned Jim Collins already, or the book Good to Great. I'm mentioning Jim Collins, who is on my top 10 of all time books that I probably read in my business career as well. And he talked about having, who are the right people to put on the bus, right? If you had to start your organization over today, who are the ones that would be getting a seat on that bus? So I give Jim Collins, Jim, if you ever listen to one of these podcasts, I learned that phrase from you, and it makes so much sense. Scott, thinking back to that experience of leading and selling and managing individuals to achieve extraordinary results, what were the most rewarding parts of that experience to you? What do you miss the most from those days?
The most rewarding part is that, and it exists today. Many of them carried on to take on C-suite roles and responsibilities. They're leaders today, that I guess I'm not sure that they maybe believed that they could be leaders, and
Mm,
they were given opportunities. And the one thing that there's two ways that executives, managers think. One is that I'm here to develop talent, and hopefully they go on to great things. Or the other one is, I've got really good talent and I don't want to lose them, so I won't promote them and I won't give them an opportunity to thrive. It's one or the other. And our organization was always about developing talent from within. And how do we make these people? And was everybody ready? No. Did we take some risk about putting people? But you know what? Giving people that little push to see if they can to take on it. There's some bumps in the road, but I'll tell you what, people rise to the occasion if you have the right people. And today I'm very proud to know that many of them are leading not only the organizations that I was with, but also leading other organizations where they've taken their talent. There's only so much room at the top in a lot of organizations, so they take it, but they're out there leading, making a difference. And you asked, what do I miss though? And I know, Leo, your background with college basketball and mine with a hockey background, and also many pro athletes that you come in contact with, and I know athletes and just people. The only thing they miss is the dressing room. And what I mean by that is
yeah.
that, people, if you're a football player, the last thing you need is another linebacker coming at you to flatten you on the field, or another hockey player taking you smack into the boards. They don't miss any of that punishment and what they do to their body. What they miss is the camaraderie of guys coming together, or ladies. And you see Team Canada beat your beloved country the other night in the women's world. That whole group coming together, sharing.
You didn't need to bring that up, Scott. You didn't need to bring that up.
I'm just keeping an eye because they hadn't won in 9 years, so it was a big victory for Canada here. But just that whole dressing room is that nobody remembers what happened in this game or that game. What they remember is if we won, how did we celebrate, and what that person meant to each other, and how the team came together. So it's like I said, it's just the dressing room. That's all that really matters.
Well, it's funny when the whole experience and camaraderie, right? That team orientation. I have seen that for years. I mean, just the feeling of being around people and seeing each other, work towards a common goal, whether it's a championship, whether it's meeting a sales target, whatever it is. When you got people together and they're high-fiving and they're putting their hands together and let's go, that type of thing. Those are the things that will inspire me to my last breath. I know that. And when you talk about developing talent, I've seen some of those people. I know there were under your clock, and it is got to be amazingly rewarding to see some of those folks in C-suite, senior level executive positions at other organizations today. And the whole issue of developing and keeping them on the bus, right? It's one thing who's going to be on the bus, as we talked about the first question. It's another thing, and I referenced that as the constant need to re-recruit as well, is to not take anything for granted. We got to develop people, but we can't take it for granted that they're happy or that their needs are being met personally, professionally to do this. So there's a means of calling a timeout, I believe, to say, let's just revisit where you're at, where your head's at, that we're in line to meeting your needs for your career, for your family, and things like that. And I know you just were always sensitive to that.
Well, Leo, it's interesting. You just reminded me of something. We implemented years ago a quarterly review process. And one of the questions we asked, all of our managers asked all of their reports on a quarterly basis, who's making progress and who's ready to take the next step. And our overall philosophy in the organization was, we want to get to the point where we never have to recruit outside of our organization. We're always developing from. Now, it was aspirational. Believe me, that's when you hear that, it's almost like, are you kidding? Like, that would be impossible. Well, it's close to impossible, but if you have that as a strategy, your people know that you're putting them first, and they're going to give every opportunity to thrive in an organization. And they knew it, and our retention numbers were incredible because of it. They knew we were putting them first on their where they wanted to head in their career. So
Perfect.
it was interesting. Yeah.
Hey, Scott, when did you know it was time to move on?
Well, it's an interesting question. When is it time to move on? I think intuitively, okay. I had three people in my life that sort of, all three of them asked me different questions, and it was within a 1 year period. So my wife was the first one to ask me, when is enough? Like, when are you going to stay home with me and not travel? And Leo, you and I can talk about traveling and waking up cities, not knowing where we were, and so on and so forth. So my wife really asked me, what's in, when is enough of the travel and everything like that. But that was predicated on, a family loss that we had, a tragedy that we had in our family, which led to another discussion. And that was my daughter. And I have to say, it was probably the most profound statement that has stuck with me since she said it. And just her and I having dinner one night at a local restaurant in Oakville. And we were both going through, trying to understand the change and what had happened with us and our loss and everything like that. And she said to me, she says, Dad, I've watched you for years being able to fix anything and everything. And every company that you worked with and every job that you gave, they always sent you in to fix things. And she said, Dad, you can't fix this. You need help. And it was like, like here's at the time, a 21-year-old telling her dad that he needs help and he needs somebody to talk to. And that led me to go and talk to somebody, Dr. Gina DiGelio, which is a famous psychologist in Toronto through MedCan and so on and so forth. And she asked me a really profound question. First time I met her, she's, well, what makes you happy? And at that point, I couldn't answer the question. And it was like, oh, okay. So those three things sort of, was it time to, those are pretty deep, those things I'm just referring to, but it was like, was it time to move on? Yeah, it was. Had I thought about it before? Yes. Like I said, Leo, I was always, if there's a problem in an organization, whether it's a regional, event or regional group or overall company had a problem and they needed somebody to fix it, I was up for the challenge. I was not a babysitter. I was not a maintenance person. It was like, okay, what can we do to make this, whether it's culture, whether it's whatever, how do you get this going? But all three of those people had nothing to do with my career, nothing to do with my work aspect of life, and in everything to defining sort of where I moved on to. So it was really, really unique and interesting.
I've always known you to have broad shoulders in terms of taking a lot on. One problem, one scenario, fix this, as you said, to do that. And obviously talking to your wife, Scott, how much is enough? Talking about this with your daughter in terms of there's things you can't fix. There are a couple of questions I'd like to ask you more about your new venture and what you're doing with your business growth group and things like this. But if you don't mind talking about this, if you're comfortable, it might help the listeners. You were dealt with a family tragedy a few years ago, and I believe this is what your daughter was referencing. Relative, Dad, you can't fix this. We've got to learn to cope and to deal with this. And to what degree you're comfortable sharing your loss and how it's affected you, your family, your perspective on life now, Scott. Maybe we should just talk to that topic just for a couple minutes here and then move into your current venture and what are some of the things that you're doing to help others today and things. But what about that discussion with your daughter and how can we bring that more out for our listeners for today in whatever way you're comfortable?
Well, it was interesting. So, being your background tied to the financial industry and my background for 35 years being in the financial industry, you'd call it you've sort of reached stardom, if you will. And on a Friday, May 4th, I was speaking from the New York Stock Exchange. Yep, up there on where the paddle is, and I was up there with we were doing a huge corporate thing, but from the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, it's sort of the epicenter of what you'd ever do in your career.
Right.
And from there, my wife and I flew back to Toronto later that day, and we talked to our son Spencer, who lived in Calgary, and then unfortunately we lost Spencer the next day on May 5th, and it was just like, he was 23 years of age, had the world, everything, and it's like, and he was an athlete, and he's very unfortunate. We hear about these kids training athletes that sort of just all of a sudden something gives out, and unfortunately Spencer had a irregular heart from birth that nobody knew about, and so he passed, and it was just like, we've just I think, if you will, I think I went numb. And to be honest with you, I don't know how long I was numb, but it was for an extensive period of time. I went numb. And so it was really, I've talked about it, with bereaved families many times. I've done a lot of research on this. It was even hard to put in perspective as to how could this possibly happen when somebody's got their world in front of them. I think you had met Spencer on a few occasions. He had a grin, the size of New York City. It's just huge grin, and loved life and everything like that. So, and listen, there isn't, people say, you get over things. No, you don't. No, you don't. There people say, do I miss him daily? Yeah, let me be clear. I miss him hourly every time. But saying that, it's it makes you put everything that's ever happened to anybody in perspective. And going back to what I was referring to, that led my wife to ask me when is enough, and my daughter to say, you can't fix this, and Dr. DiGilio to ask me that wonderful question, what makes me happy. And it was, as it's easy for me to say after a number of years, but it was a turning point. And I'm actually very thankful that I wouldn't wish anybody going through it, but it was a really good thing for me to put everything in perspective on not only where I was at, but more importantly, what became important in my life going forward is really what it was.
What an amazing 48-hour roller coaster ride for you, being at the epicenter, achieving the, maybe the pinnacle of your career in terms of being there, and then being brought to such a life and family low that no one could have ever expected for you. I've talked to you about this a number of times. I know over the years, words can't express properly what you've gone through, but one of the things I'm most proud about you is a friend, is how you turn this family tragedy into a way to help others to do this. And it might be helpful for some of our folks today listening in, just to get a sense of how you turn this thing that you couldn't fix into a way to continue to make a difference to others in your life who are dealing with grief. and things. Maybe you can just speak to that for a couple minutes.
Yeah, it was quite interesting. I was I you know it took me a while to really understand. Like I said, I was numb for a period of time. I kept on working. I actually ran harder than I had ran before in business,
Mm,
and to the point where it's like, oh my, this is crazy. But you know, so I really started assessing what I wanted to do in the future, and I also my own experience of dealing with, how people um, dealt with me, and and I say this only in the kindest way possible, is that if I was walking down a hallway at work and somebody saw me coming, there was a pretty good chance they would turn left or right to avoid asking, how you doing? And as crazy as that sounds,
yeah.
there, not one person in the world, and it's not our situation, it's anybody's situation, people just don't know what to say. They just don't know what to say. So I started doing some research, and I thought, well, is this really normal stuff? And so I interviewed 25 families I did my own research project, and I interviewed 25 families that had lost a child. And I had some help in this from an organization, um, and it was just eerie, the similarities, what people experienced. It's like who their best friends were, and did they remain. Here's a couple of stats that might blow you away and other people. I don't know if I've shared this with anybody, but people that lose a child, 90% of marriages fail. Okay, 90% of marriages fail. 95% of people that lose a child change careers within 18 months.
Wow.
And so all these stats, and then they really start assessing, what's important and all this kind of stuff. So um, I did this research, and then I thought, well, there has to be a way to help. So I got involved with it started out being looking globally. It's like, is there, there's bereaved families of Ontario, where people that lose somebody. And then I got involved in sort of in Halton region here where I live. There's an organization that I got involved with, and sort of, if I was the only male, there was 700 volunteers in all aspects of volunteering, but in the bereaved families, or bereavement area, people that had lost somebody, I sort of got. I was the only I was the only male that volunteered under the age of 65. Okay, of 700 volunteers, I was the only male under the age of 65, and it sort of became an area where it's like, oh, like, I'm more than happy to talk to people that lose a child, like sort of between the ages of 16 and 23. And unfortunately, there's many things like drug overdose and suicide and all this kind of stuff. And so I just wanted to help, because I'd walked in their shoes,
Right.
and what originally the counselor said was, well, you can relate to these people, and I could, like, and I'll tell a quick story, Leo, is that I remember going out to see this gentleman who had just lost his 18-year-old daughter, and we were sitting out and he was out in the front when I pulled up of his house, and it'd been a few months, but he just was completely numb and everything like that. And his opening line was me, and he said, I'm just hoping that the next car goes by, takes me with it, so that he could end his life. And that's not uncommon for people to think that when they go through this type of thing.
Yeah.
And I know that's pretty deep, but it's fascinating. And there isn't any of us that haven't dealt with tragedy and haven't dealt with difficult situations and all this kind of stuff. And thankfully, we have friends, we have family, we have others that are supportive. And I wanted to give back. I wanted to help people, which sort of led me to sort of, if you will, um, I really think it was an extension of my career before and my career now, where it's like, well, I've always sort of, I don't know if you call, is coaching helping? I think so. is is coaching, helping people that have had a loss understand that tomorrow will come, and there
Yeah.
will be there will be an ability for you to move your left foot in front of your right foot, and so on and so forth, and move forward. It's not going away, and it's not going away, the pain, but you will adjust accordingly, and
Yeah.
being able to deal with this. So
What's interesting is um, the perspective this has given you as a dad losing your son, and seeing other grieving families, and all these statistics and these things that you're learning for the first time, the people going down the different hallway, the 95% of people changing careers because people are probably just uncomfortable, right? Being around people and not
absolutely.
knowing what to say, that they felt that they maybe needed to move on and things like this. What amazes me is when in our day-to-day business dealings where people get upset over the littlest of things. They don't like the font on the PowerPoint. They're waiting on something to come in. I thought you were going to get this to me by 4:00. It's 4:15. Where is it? It's like all these little things that are so trivial, but people put so much significance on it for their careers. And as you know, I lost my only brother, my hero, a decade ago. And I developed just the whether call it a mantra or just a lexicon, part of my lexicon or phrase. When I'm confronted with those situations now with people, they're just losing perspective. And I just say, nobody died. Nobody died. Did anybody die here? Okay, so we got to change the PowerPoint. We got to redo the proposal. We got to. Why do you need this by such and such a date? I mean, it's just people are running around in such a frenetic pace, in that they're feeling that their whole lives are dependent on things that just in the big scheme of life, they mean nothing. They mean nothing because it's all about that conversation with your wife. How much is enough? It's a conversation with a psychologist of what makes you happy. It's a conversation with your wife, with your daughter in terms of, Dad, we've got to move on because you can't fix this, but you could take it and make a difference to do this. Now you're making a difference now with your new career. So you started this, and you're leading entrepreneurs to work now on their business strategies. You're providing this cohort experience, personal coaching. How is this life, from the corporate world to a family tragedy manifested now to helping entrepreneurs? How'd you get involved with this? Tell us a little bit about this, please.
Well, I got involved first and foremost by saying, I want to stay busy because I'm young. Okay. I feel young, I guess maybe it's better, but I feel young and vibrant, but I also want to be able to control my own calendar. So I really started it out as a, part-time, thinking, and my number one goal was that I would not travel. So I wanted to be sort of in a geographical close to our home, and so on and so forth. And that was really the parameter that I looked at, is like, okay, so, and then I sort of got involved with understanding entrepreneurs. And when I say entrepreneurs, these are, if you will, businesses with from basically $1 million of sales to $10 million. So these are small entrepreneurs, family, probably our biggest client probably has 60 or 70 employees. So this is the lifeblood of North America, if you will. This is what drives and keeps everything going. So I was really, but I'll go back to the same thing, Leo, is that it's just an extension of coaching. It's whether you're coaching, salespeople, or whether you're coaching in an organization or providing leadership, it's the same. I mean, if somebody say, well, how do you define your career? I guess I'm just a coach. I'm just a coach of, in different aspects and different challenges and everything like that. So I found it to be really interesting that these people are out there, and they need coaching, and more importantly, they want coaching. But let me somewhat jokingly tell you one of the main reasons why I decided to do this. You and I have played a lot of golf together over the years. Before I moved to this, I had never been able to go to a men's night at my golf club ever. And in the last 5 years, I've only missed one.
Wow.
So the priority is that I'm now living on my calendar, and it's amazing if you communicate with people on when you're available, they'll adjust accordingly. You don't need to be there. I love your point. It's like, well, the PowerPoint is this. Really? Like, put that in perspective.
Exactly.
Like, and what are the things? So I was able to, sort of plan my future where I wanted to enjoy things that are important to me, and I wasn't able to before. Not all aspects. Listen, I've had an incredible life, but there's certain things that I wasn't able to do that would mean nothing to most people, but meant a lot to me. So playing golf with my buddies on, Thursday afternoon. I'm going today, Thursday afternoon. I'll tell you what, if you'd wanted to do this at 2:00 today, it wouldn't have happened, because that just means that much.
You were like me, collecting room keys from traveling all over North America or wherever life and business were taking you at the time. So what's your next big project?
Well, one of my buddies shared with me a few years ago a book called Younger Next Year. I don't know if you've read it, but it's really about getting to that point in life where there's a hill to climb, or there's also a cliff that you're going to fall off, and you better make a decision which one you want to take. And unfortunately, when you start going down the cliff, most people can't recover. So I was pretty inspired by a book called, Younger Next Year, and so I've read it numerous times. And so really, health has become such a big priority for me, in understanding that if you don't have your health, you don't have anything.
Right, exactly.
The other thing, as I figured out, is the only thing you and I and anybody else in this world can't buy is time. So I really started thinking about this, and so I have been, as sort of one of these things. And what's the next big thing project for me is I've been writing a lot. You inspired me in the past to write and continue to write notes and everything like this. So I've got somewhat of a book title that I'm thinking about, and it's called Winning in the Third Period of Life. Sort of goes back to my hockey days and everything like this. But what is that last third of your life going to be like? And are you going to win? Are you going to win in that period of life where there's so much, like, my daughter's getting married in basically 2 months from now. It's just a huge factor. So
sure.
I can hardly wait, as a grandkid's just around the corner. But how are you going to live that last third of your life? And is it going to be everything that you want, or are you going to be somewhat in control of that from a health standpoint? Are you going to be able to do the things? And so that's sort of the next big project of
wow.
Well,
as you know, I can't thank you enough for your time today, but in our program that we emphasize, there are 7 different elements, as you remember. It's about living a life of significance, and living a life with no regrets, living a life with abundance, with gratitude, with perspective, being your best, and living your legacy. Which one of these resonates the most to you? These are all cards and they're questions. No, they're like the questions your wife asked you, the question your psychologist asked you, and the statement that your daughter gave you. Which one of those 7 areas resonates with you the most?
Well, because of what transpired, it really comes down to no regrets. And it's just that And there's so many different perspectives that come into play with no regrets. And it's made me think many times in going through, the sabbatical and the program. When you started really sharing your thoughts about sabbatical, I thought you were writing a perspective on my life, because it touched on so many different areas. And
Right.
as I've shared with you, I think it's one of the most, or if not the most powerful experience for a human to go through when they're at that point where they're really doing a self-assessment of themselves and what's next. So it's really, really, really fascinating.
So I got some questions here for you, but I'm only going to pick one.
Okay.
So you pick the number here. So you have no idea what I'm going to ask you here. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cards here. Pick a number, partner.
I'll take number 3.
Number 3, it says, is there anything in your professional life that you would label as a regret? And could it be changed now? Anything in your professional life that you would label as a regret, and can it be changed?
In my professional, you know what? My only regret, and I'll be honest, I sort of teeter on this, is that after leaving the corporate world, okay, there was some doubt whether I should go and take one more big challenge on. And it's like, I have had that, should I have done that? So I really I struggled with that for a period of time, and just like, am I going to have this regret that I didn't? And a couple of my friends I went to and said, listen, like, what do you think? And they both said, you're crazy. That's not a regret, but it was always sort of in that.
Makes you think of it in that regard. See, there you go again, fixing things. Right? There you go. Like, bring it on. I can manage this. Put it back on my shoulders. I'll take this sucker through the third period for you. I'll find a way to score the winning goal. And I think, to bring this to conclusion, our discussion today, there's probably many more of those Wednesday night golf get-togethers with your buddies that would not have happened if you had made that decision, or playing golf on a Thursday afternoon to escape. And you're still finding time now to change people's lives on what's important to you, helping them. You're asking the questions of them that people have asked of you. And when is enough? Things that they're trying to fix, things that you're trying to figure out, and helping them what makes them happy. That's the difference, my friend, that you're making in people's life today. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for taking this time with us today. Scott, thank you so much. So much value in our friendship. And I just wanted to remind you and everybody else listening, your next big project is you. So thank you, Scott, for joining us today.
Well, Leo, thanks for having me. It is always, as I started today, it's always a pleasure being in your company. And what you are doing for people to really, with the sabbatical experience, is allowing people to find their inner peace and to really assess, where they're at, what's important. And, most people don't take the time to take that sabbatical to really do it, and making a huge point in that life. So I'm thrilled to be, to call you my friend, and what you do is making a difference, and you've made a big difference in my life so far, and I know you will in the future. And I can't thank you for everything that we've been through together, shared, and we will going forward.
Well, and as we always say, when I hit those rare golf shots, when you tell me, Leo, pretty to watch, and I always tell you, stay well, stay close.
Be good.
Stay
Thanks.
close, man. Take care of yourself. Thank you.